Hello guys, and welcome to another tier list video, and today I will be ranking the chapters in the Paper Mario series, except for Color Splash, because 1, I haven't beat it, yes, I know I'm a fraud, and 2, the chapters in Color Splash are very different from the rest of the series, and really don't have the core structure that the rest of the games do, so I'm just gonna leave it out. Like, for that aspect, even if I did finish Color Splash, I feel like that still is, like, kind of hard to rank, I would say, compared to the rest of the games. But before we get started, there's actually a 1,000-Year Door ad on Tierbaker, which I thought was pretty cool. I just wanted to show that for a second. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So we have Paper Mario 64 Prologue. I honestly would have to put this in because I feel like if it's not your first playthrough, it is a bit of a slog to get through. I mean, story-wise, it's great, but like, just gameplay-wise, it's really only good if you're playing it for the first time. Otherwise, it is pretty slow, I would say. Like, since you don't have action commands, it takes you a while to get action commands. And it just takes up, like, a lot of time, I would say. It's a good tutorial, don't get me wrong, but, like, for replaying it, it's just not that great. But moving on, Chapter 1, I would say, is pretty good. Since it's a really good introduction to the chapter structure, it introduces 2 partners and has, like, great tutorials for both partners, like with Cooper and Bombette. And, like, with Cooper, you kind of have, like, the implementation in, like, just the overworld and everything on, like, Pleasant Path, and then you also have the Koopa Bros Fortress as well, which is a great tutorial for both Cooper and Bombette, and their stories are pretty good as well. And I like the part with the fuzzies, too, that's pretty fun, and, like, it's definitely a good step up from the prologue, because it definitely kind of has you experiment more with the action commands, since there's, like, tougher enemies for newer players, like Koopa Troopas and Bob-Bombs. You kind of have to get used to blocking, as well as kind of getting around the Koopa Troopas' defense. So I think it's a very good chapter, kind of fully kind of throwing you into, like, the whole Paper Mario vibe and everything. And the Koopa Bros are also a great boss as well. It's definitely a very iconic boss. So yeah. So moving on, we have Chapter 2, and I would say this is also pretty good. Not as good as Chapter 1, but I think it's still a very solid chapter overall. I actually really like how open the Dry Desert is. I mean, yeah, it is kind of easy to get lost for newer players, but I still like how it is set up, and I think it is, like, pretty fun to have, like, a wide open area, like with the Paper Mario formula. They really didn't experiment with this again until Origami King. It's actually pretty similar to how Origami King handled the desert, except it's kind of segmented into different areas due to the limitations of the Nintendo 64. But I like how the Dry Desert is set up, and it's also, like, pretty fun as well with how the Dry Ruins are and everything. But yeah, I feel like this chapter is, like, not that long. Like, once you get used to the whole, like, map and everything, when you're replaying the game. They also like the section with Mount Rugged as well. That is pretty fun, and definitely, is kind of spikes the difficulty up just a little bit from Chapter 1, which I think is pretty good. And there's definitely more enemies with, like, higher defense, like the Clefs and everything. And you also get Parakarry, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think Chapter 2 is pretty good. I also like the dungeon as well, with Dry Ruins in Tutton Koopa as well. So I think it's definitely a pretty good chapter. And then Chapter 3, I would definitely have to say is peak. Like, there's just so much variety in Chapter 3. Like, you start off in the Forever Forest, which is actually a pretty cool maze-type area. It's, like, not too cryptic, since you do get, like, hints on where to go, and, like, the game kind of tells you about, like, how to get through it. And, like, there's also the mansion as well, where you get Lady Bow, which is definitely the best partner in the game, both story-wise and battle-wise, I would say. And the mansion is pretty fun from like a puzzle perspective as well. since you like kind of like utilize like a lot of abilities and kind of move around and unlock different areas. It's pretty fun. The Gusty Gulch and Tubba Blubba is really fun as well. Tubba Blubba is definitely one of the most iconic bosses in the game. Like, just due to his, like, whole weakness and everything, and the fact that he's, like, invincible without his heart. I think that's a pretty cool gimmick. And, like, the whole castle sequence as well is pretty fun. It definitely makes use, like, a lot of those abilities. And also Gusty Gulch as well, since you, like, encounter, like, a lot of, like, Hyper Goombas and, like, Hyper enemies and everything. So it definitely is a pretty good tutorial for Bo. So I would just say overall, Chapter 3 is just great all around, like, story-wise, gameplay-wise. It's just, like, just really fun overall. And Chapter 4, I would say, is also, like, great. It's not peak, I would say, because you do kind of... I mean, some people kind of complain about the backtracking, but I really do not think it's an issue at all. Like, with 64 in general, and this also goes for Chapter 6, I don't think the backtracking is really an issue at all. Like, it really doesn't feel like an issue in this game because of, like, your abilities and everything. The fact that you have Speedy Spin, it really doesn't feel like a chore to go between areas. Like, even though I don't think it's that much of an issue in Thousand Year Door, I can at least understand where people are coming from with Thousand Year Door. 64, though, the areas are much smaller, and you also have, like, Speedy Spin with the Spin Dash and everything. So backtracking really isn't an issue at all in 64. And Shy Guy's Toy Box is just really fun. Like, there's so many Shy Guy varieties, and the whole aesthetic of the area is great as well. Like, it's just really fun, really enjoyable, and, like, I like the whole gimmick as well, like, kind of going in and out of the toy box, like, kind of unlocking different things and fixing up the tracks. I think that's pretty fun. I really like how it's laid out and everything. It feels, like, kind of unique compared to the rest of the chapters. But yeah, there's one other chapter in the game that feels unique in a similar way that isn't handled as well, and I'll get to that in a little bit. You probably know which chapter I'm talking about, because it is a fairly infamous chapter in terms of Paper Mario 64. But moving on, Chapter 5, I would say, is also good. It's definitely better than Chapter 1, I would say. I wouldn't put it in great. I would say it's very solid, I would say, because it does feel like a tad bit repetitive when you are, like, replaying it, I guess, when you're going through, like, the jungle area and finding the baby Yoshis. Definitely not a bad section at all. It just feels like a tad bit repetitive when you're going back to it. But still really fun. I like how it, like, has a lot of, like, poison enemies, and then in Mount Lava Lava, there's, like, more, like, fire-based enemies, which is definitely helpful since you get sushi, and that's really fun. Then you also encounter the Lava Piranha, which I would say is a pretty easy boss once you know its weakness, but still pretty fun, like, if you're playing through the game for the first time. But yeah, I would definitely say that Chapter 5 is a solid chapter, definitely really enjoyed it. But yeah, Chapter 6. I think this one is just okay, I would say. Like, it's definitely not bad, and I would say it's better than the prologue, but it does have some issues. And I don't think it's the fact that, like, you have to backtrack, because that's what some people mention about, like, the weakness of this chapter. I think it's more the fetch quest aspect of it. I mean, yeah, it kind of does have that, like, backtracking kind of thing incorporated into it, but, like, the fact that it's kind of like a fetch quest, that you have to go into one area to get one thing, go back to another area, that can feel like a bit annoying sometimes, especially if you're replaying the game. So I feel like it's just okay. I mean, some of the flower characters, in my opinion, are a bit annoying, but I do like Lackluster. I think he's pretty cool. So there is, like, some parts of this chapter that are pretty good. So I would say, like, it's just okay. There's some things balancing this chapter out. Like, I like the enemies that are here. They're definitely, like, a little more difficult if you're not over-leveled. If you don't, like, fight all of those optional bosses you get after Chapter 5. I feel like, it is, a little more challenging for newer players, especially Huff and Puff. I think Huff and Puff is a great boss That's definitely one thing that elevates it over its problems. But yeah, I would say Chapter 6 is just okay. There really aren't any, like, bad chapters of 64. Even the prologue isn't bad, I just put it in kind of meh. But even then, it's probably better for newer players anyway, but 64 really doesn't have any bad chapters. But moving on, another one that I really like, Chapter 7. I think Chapter 7 is definitely peak. It might actually be one of my favorites in the series, I would say, because there's so much variety here, and the snow theme is also great. I would say it definitely has one of my favorite snow themes in the Mario franchise, just due to how, like, nicely they implemented it. The music is great, the whole vibe and atmosphere is great, and even, like, story-wise, it's pretty fun as well. Like, you have, like, the murder mystery in Shiver City, like, with the Mayor Penguin who isn't actually dead, that you find out. That it's pretty funny. And there's also, like, the Herringway character and everything. And then you also go to Starborn Valley, or you see, like, the Star Kids there as well, which is really cool. And then you go to the Crystal Palace, which is, like, honestly, one of the best dungeons in the game, I would say. That is just an excellently designed dungeon. And you have, Crystal King, which is an amazing boss. He's usually the profile picture that I have on social media in December. So, that's how you know that he has a great design and everything. So yeah, just absolutely amazing boss there. But Chapter 7 overall is just great in general. Like, there's so much here. It's like, I feel like it's the perfect example of, like, a Paper Mario chapter. It really has everything that you'd want. And then Chapter 8, I would also say, is great. I wouldn't necessarily put it in peak, because I feel like it is mostly based on, like, the battling and puzzles. It's kind of like a gauntlet of everything that you know, which is great, but the story aspects are kind of more towards the end of the chapter. Still a very good chapter, and a lot of great bosses here as well. And, like, especially at the end, like, with, Bowser and everything, that is just, like, an incredible ending. Like, definitely one of the best, like, Bowser bosses in the Mario franchise, I would say. So, Chapter 8 is really fun. But moving on to Thousand Year Door. So, with the prologue here, I would say that it's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's better than the other ones that I put in good, because those are, like, really fun. But I feel like it's definitely a better tutorial, or a faster tutorial, I guess, than the original Paper Mario, because you do have action commands from the start, which I like. I like that that gives you that from the start. Like, for returning players, it's pretty quick to get through the prologue, but it's also a great tutorial for newer players as well. So I feel like it's the perfect length and everything. Like, you encounter, like, Lord Crump, you get to see the X-Nauts for the first time, you get to experience Rogueport for the first time. It gives you an excellent introduction of Rogueport, I would say. Like, it gives you, like, those whole vibes of it being, like, this kind of, like, dirty, run-down city. I mean, at least that's the first impressions of Rogueport. Later in the game, you find that there's so many interesting characters there, and you don't really, like, it's not always right to judge a book by its cover, because there's a lot of great characters in Rogueport, but it definitely gives you that impression that it is a huge departure from Paper Mario 64 in terms of theming. But yeah, I think the prologue of Thousand Year Door is great. It also introduces, like, Frankly and the Thousand Year Door itself, since you get, like, Sweet Treat and everything. And then you get your first Cursed as well, with the plane mode and everything. So definitely a very good tutorial and prologue. Chapter 1, I would also say is very good. Actually, I would put it, like, a little below 64's Chapter 5, but a little above 64's Chapter 1. Because I feel like it definitely is a more refined Chapter 1 than 64's Chapter 1, but it's still, like, it's just great overall. Like, I kind of like how it is a bit of a throwback to Paper Mario 64's Chapter 1 without feeling like a rehash. Like, it does have a lot of similarities there, like with a village of Koopas, with Petalburg, and you kind of go into an area with, like, Fuzzies, with Schwank Fortress, which I think is pretty cool, and you also kind of go into, like, a fortress that kind of, like, utilizes a lot of your abilities that you have so far. Like, it's definitely a parallel to 64's Chapter 1, but I don't think it's too similar. It's not like a carbon copy at all. Like, a lot of people say that, oh, Thousand Year Door is just a carbon copy of 64, but I disagree. Like, it really just takes a lot of elements from 64 and kind of, like, adapts them in a very different way. Like, it still has a very different vibe and still has a kind of feels like a departure from 64 in a lot of ways. So I feel like they're taking, like, all the good elements from 64 and kind of, like, amplifying them and mixing them with new elements in Thousand Year Door. But Chapter 2 is definitely very different from 64, and honestly, I would say this is probably one of the weakest chapters in the game, I would say. Like, honestly, I think there's something to love about, like, all of the chapters in Thousand Year Door. Actually, even 2 a little bit, but it does kind of fall flat a little bit, like, with the... I'm hoping they improve it in the remake. But visually, it's great. Story-wise, very fun as well. And I really like the fact that they reference Pikmin. It's kind of like a spoof on Pikmin with the Punies. The Punies are great. But the only thing that holds this chapter back is the gameplay, because it does kind of feel like a bit monotonous in the tree. But, like, it is kind of annoying to get the Punies through it. But it's really not that bad, I would say. I would put it in okay, honestly. Maybe a little below Paper Mario 64's Chapter 6. I would definitely say it's a little better than meh, because, like, there's a lot of great aspects of the Boggly Woods. Like, aesthetically, it's amazing, especially in the remake. They might even fix the puny AI in the remake, making it, like, a lot better. But, yeah, I think it's just kind of okay, I would say. There definitely are, like, a lot of redeeming aspects, which is why I don't put it in the lower categories, but I still think it is, like, very good. You also get, Flurry as well, and I think Flurry is kind of an okay partner, I would say. She's definitely not bad. I used to think she was bad, but she does have Lip Lock, and Gale Force is pretty funny since you get star points from that, so I think Flurry is not that bad, I would say. So I would say it's definitely an okay chapter. But moving on to Chapter 3, this one definitely goes right into peak. This one is amazing. It amplifies the aspect of Thousand Year Door that is, like, so great about the game with the battles. And it is just really fun overall. And I really like the clear conditions as well. I mean, even though there can be, like, weird ones that can get you into, like, a little bit of a pickle in times, but it still is very fun. And I really like the boss fights here. Okay, spoilers. Spoilers. If you haven't beaten Thousand Year Door, wait to watch the rest of this video until you play the remake and everything. Play the remake, but wait to watch this video if you haven't played Thousand Year Door yet. But really like Rock Hawk. Definitely a great boss overall. The music is great. And Bancho Grubba is also really fun as well, even though he is a bit easy. Since he's just, like, upgrading the entire time, but, like, still very fun. The whole plot twisted story behind Chapter 3 is also amazing as well, with Jolene and Prince Mush and everything. I really like that story there, and it's just great overall. And then you also get the Baby Yoshi as well. That's really fun, how you get him from, like, Mr. Hoggle after he was trying to make him into this, Southern Fried egg dog of tastiness, but you save him and he becomes your partner and helps you get through the pit. So I think it's pretty fun. I should specify Blitz Pit, not Pit of 100 Trials, but Baby Yoshi's pretty fun. But yeah, moving on to Chapter 4. Okay, this one is going to be very controversial because I know some people do not like this chapter. But Chapter 4 is actually my favorite chapter in Thousand Year Door. And I'll explain why. It goes a little above Chapter 3. You know what? Just for fun, I'll put it above Chapter 7, but honestly, I think they're about equal. I would say they're just treat them like they're equal, but, you know, Chapter 4, I know people have a lot of problems with the backtracking here, and I really do not mind it that much. It kind of... Honestly, the fact that you have to backtrack, it kind of adds to, like, the whole story experience. Where backtracking really does get annoying, I'll talk about later on, but it's really not that bad, especially when you get Vivian. And I feel like the good aspects of this chapter are definitely some of the highest highs in Thousand Year Door. Like, the story is great. Like, you start off in, like, this gloomy, depressing town where the citizens are being turned into pigs, and you hear these bells ringing in the background. You don't know where it's coming from. Very spooky and mysterious. And then you find, like, this mysterious ghost named Desmond. I'm not gonna say his actual name, even though I am spoiling Thousand Year Door, but I'm just gonna call him Desmond. But you find Desmond, who actually steals your name and body, and all of your partners leave to join him, and then you're like kind of left alone and everything. But it's like such a really cool idea, I would say. Like, I totally get that the backtracking can be annoying here, but I just feel like the whole vibe and story behind it is just so fun overall. And then you also get Vivian. Like, it definitely kind of shows more of, like, Vivian's character development here, which is great. But yeah, between Vivian and Desmond and everything, it's just an excellent chapter overall. But I can understand why some people don't like it. I just personally do not mind the areas where, because really, it's really not that bad, I would say. Especially, like, when I said, especially when you get Vivian, if you're replaying the game and know what to do, it's not too hard to avoid enemies. Sure, you'll run into the crazy Daisy here and there, but, like, I don't think it's that bad. Where it does get bad is a little later in the game. But I feel like the backtracking in Thousand Year Door is a bit overblown. But in the remake, I feel like especially it's gonna be definitely alleviated a lot. But yeah, moving on to Chapter 5, this one is pretty great as well, since you get Bobbery here, and you also have the whole story with Flavio as well. And I really like the whole vibes of Keelhaul Key. It's pretty fun. And also Pirate's Grotto with Cortez. It's really fun. It really feels like an adventure overall, and you get to see, like, Bobbery's development as well. I'm definitely putting this into great. Yeah, I would put it at the top of great. It's just really fun overall, and I just really enjoyed this chapter. I mean, there is a tad bit of backtracking, but the area really isn't that big, I would say. And I think Pirate's Grotto is a pretty fun dungeon, so I think it definitely kind of puts it up there and everything. And also the whole sequence at the end where Cortez actually helps you, like, Flavio, like, convinces him to, like, help you, and then, like, there's, like, the kind of, like, the fight between the X-Nauts with Lord Crump, who, like, basically, he disguised himself as, like, one of the members of, like, Flavio's crew, and then, like, revealed himself. So there's, like, the epic battle between, like, the Cortez, like, with the Embers and, like, the X-Nauts. That is really fun. But yeah, Chapter 5 is pretty great. Chapter 6, I would also say, is pretty fun as well. I would also put it in great, I would say. Because I would, maybe at the bottom of great, because, I mean, there is a little less battling here, but it is really fun. I really like the whole mystery aspect again, kind of paralleling 64's Chapter 7, especially since there's, like, Pennington, the Bumpty character, and everything. But again, it doesn't feel like a carbon copy. It feels like it's doing its own thing, just kind of inspired by 64. But the whole train theming is really fun as well. Riverside Station is a fun dungeon. The Smorg is a fun boss. And then you have, like, the Poshley Heights as well. So I would say Chapter 6 is pretty fun. Chapter 7, though, is kind of a mixed bag, I would say. With Chapter 7, there is, like, a lot of backtracking at the beginning. Like, General White is really, like, one of the only times in the game where I feel like the backtracking does get a bit much. But in the remake, it's probably going to be heavily improved. But where it stands, I would still say it's good. Like, because the second half of the chapter definitely elevates it quite a lot. And it's definitely really fun at the end. Even, like, when you do fight, like, Lord Crump again, it still is a fun boss with Magnus von Grapple 2.0. The Exonaut Fortress is really fun. But yeah, I would say Chapter 7 is still pretty good, despite its issues. But yeah, and then Chapter 8, I would honestly put in peak. It is just incredible overall, like with the whole story and everything. I wouldn't put it at like the top of peak, because I do feel like some of these other chapters are a little better. But story-wise, Chapter 8 is great, and you kind of get to see like the whole culmination of all the mechanics and things that you get in Thousand Year Door. So many great bosses here. Like you get Gloomtail, the Shadow Sirens with Desmond, and Grotus, Bowser and Cammy, then the Shadow Queen at the end, which has multiple phases, and I think there's like another like Dry Bones fight as well. So I think it's really fun overall. Like a lot of great boss battles here. The enemy variety is great as well. Just an excellent dungeon overall, and I really like the gloomy, creepy vibes here. It's really like very different than what you would see in Mario. I mean, I guess it's kind of comparable to like the ghost houses and things, but it's like a very different vibe as well. It's just really cool. And the Shadow Queen is an excellent boss fight. The ending is just really fun, and I would definitely say this is one of the best chapters in the series. But moving on to Super Paper Mario, I would say Chapter 1 is pretty good. I would put it maybe a little above Thousand Year Doors Chapter 7, because I would say it's a pretty good introduction to Super Paper Mario's mechanics, and it doesn't really have any egregiously weird moments like Super Paper Mario does have sometimes. And starting with Super Paper Mario here, I know a lot of people are very mixed on this game, but I actually really like Super Paper Mario. Yeah, I do have some problems with some parts of the game, but I feel like it still is a very good game, I would say, despite its issues. But Chapter 1, I would say, is very solid. The only weird moment is like the section where you have to like jump under the palm tree like 20 times, but that really isn't that bad. Like, most of Chapter 1 is like pretty solid, I would say, and is a pretty good introduction to like all the mechanics in the game. Well, not all the mechanics, but like a lot of the basic mechanics in the game. But yeah, Chapter 2, this one is kind of weird. I love it aesthetically. I think it's pretty cool aesthetically, but there is a pretty egregious part, I would say, towards like the part with like Mimi, where you have to like hold like the controller for like 10 minutes. That is pretty weird. There should be like some way to like get past that or something. I know you get like the code, like eventually the end level and everything, but like, man, I mean, I understand the immersion of it and the idea, but I don't know. I'm gonna put it in meh, honestly. It's not bad, because like I do feel like there's some elements that like elevate it, like the story, the Mimi moments are pretty cool, but I don't know. I'm putting it in meh. But on the other hand, one that's actually pretty good, I would say, is Chapter 3. I would put this in great. I would definitely put this in great. Cause like there's a lot of fun moments here. Like you fight Bowser, Bowser joins your party. There's also like DiMeggio as well. And like the whole aesthetic here is really fun as well. Like it's kind of like has a blocky, so retro-esque look to it, and I mean that in a good way. But I think it's fun. There's a lot of like fun bosses, like I already mentioned here. Francis is a hilarious character, and I really like Fort Francis. Like, since it's pretty funny, it has like a lot of those like early internet references, which I think is actually pretty funny for like a Paper Mario game, and surprisingly fitting for like for the humor in a Paper Mario game. But I also like the Paper Mario references here, like the references to 64, Thousand Year Door, like in some of like Francis's storage rooms. And I think Francis even like mentioned some things, like there was like a Grotus Chronicle or something like that, like the X-Nauts thing. Like there were like a few references to the older Paper Mario games here, which I thought was really cool. But Chapter 3 is definitely pretty great. Chapter 4, honestly, I would also say is great. Maybe like towards the bottom of great, I would say, but I actually like the gameplay in Chapter 4. I think it's pretty fun. It's a fun change of pace, I would say. And I just like the whole theming behind it and everything, like since you kind of have like the shoot 'em up section and everything. I think that's pretty fun. The Wozode is a pretty fun dungeon as well. I really like the gravity mechanics and everything. And then you also like encounter Mr. L. So I think Chapter 4 is pretty great. Chapter 5, though, this one is a pretty weak chapter as well, I would say. I mean, story-wise, it has some, like, pretty good, like, elements, as like, with the, Florosapiens and the Kragnons and everything. I think that's pretty cool. And I like the aesthetic as well, but I think Chapter 5, like, it has some really weird puzzles. Like, the block puzzle in 5-1 is not good. I would say, like, it's kind of on the level of Chapter 2, I would say. So, I would say probably in meh. Again, another meh chapter. I wouldn't put it in bad. I probably made a tier list before where I did put it in bad, but I don't think it's bad. I still think it's just kind of meh, because it does have some redeeming qualities, but, yeah. So, the next one is Chapter 6, and even though the fighting can get a bit repetitive, like in the Samur Kingdom, I think it is, like, a very powerful chapter, I would say towards the end, like, with the World of Nothing. So, I would honestly put this in okay. Probably towards the top of okay, because, yeah, it does feel, like, repetitive at times, but, like, it still has, like, a lot of, like, fun elements as well, and, like, the ending is just, like, really impactful, I would say. Not quite on the level of something where I'd put in peak or great, but I would still, like, it kind of is an element, it's kind of like a Thousand Year Door Chapter 2-esque situation, where, like, some of the elements do kind of balance it out. You know what? I'll put it in good. Yeah, I would say it's kind of on the level of Thousand Year Doors Chapter 7. Maybe a little better. I'll put it a little above that. But, yeah, moving on, we have Super Paper Mario's Chapter 7. Another controversial opinion here, maybe not as controversial as Thousand Year Doors Chapter 4 being at the top, but I think Chapter 7 is the best chapter in Super Paper Mario. I think it is a really cool depiction of the afterlife, I would say. Like, it pulls from, like, various things, like, including Greek mythology, like, a lot of various depictions of the afterlife, which I think is really interesting and really fascinating, I would say. Since I think that's, like, a really interesting topic overall, and the way they incorporate it in the Mario universe is really cool. Like, you start off, like, in the underwear, which kind of, like, represents, like, hell, and you have, like, the River Twix, which is kind of, like, a spoof on the River Styx. You have, like, the underhands, which are, like, really creepy, but then you also kind of have, like, the Underchomp, which is really cool as well, and then you also have, like, the Over There Stare, which I think is kind of a, like, I mean, gameplay-wise, that can get, like, a bit repetitive, but I don't think it's too bad, honestly. Still, though, I think aesthetically it holds up pretty well. And then you have, like, the Over There, which represents heaven, and I think it's really cool. And you also have, like, Lovebee's story, which is also very impactful as well. So and then you also have, like, the boss is kind of underwhelming, I would say, like, with, Bone Chill. It is pretty funny, though, how you could beat it in, like, a couple seconds, but I think Chapter 7 is great. I would honestly put it, like, around here, I would say. It definitely is pretty great, I would say. The Underchomp is, like, I would say, is a pretty fun boss, since it kind of, like, it's kind of a reference to both, like, Dragon Quest and the Mother series, like, how it has, like, a traditional RPG battle system, and, like, surprisingly, it actually isn't, like, a, like, with Super Paper Mario, a lot of people say that, like, oh, there's no turn-based battles, but there technically is a turn-based battle with the Underchomp, so I think that's pretty funny. Chapter 8, I would also put it in peak. Maybe a little below Thousand Year Doors Chapter 8, but I still think it is pretty great overall. Very impactful towards the end of the game with like Dementio and Count Bleck and Tippy. Just like very great overall, and just a very emotional ending and everything. I know the final boss of Super Dementio is kind of underwhelming, but you can't deny that it is really cool. But yeah, that's Super Paper Mario. So moving on, we have Sticker Star. Okay. So we have Chapter 1. Immediately, I'm putting it in bad. Like, you can see, like, some hints of, like, a good game in here, like a very tiny hint of it. Like, with Chapter 1 having a somewhat similar structure to Thousand Year Door and 64's Chapter 1, like, with the fortress and, like, everything, but it's not good. It already has like some pretty egregious puzzles at the beginning. You still have to find like stickers in areas, and it's still pretty annoying. It's not terrible, but it's still bad. It is still bad, I would say. Definitely not a good first impression, but do you really need a good first impression with this game? It is, because it's pretty terrible. So, moving on, Chapter 2. This is where I originally quit before actually going back to this game and playing it again recently. Still, in my opinion, it's awful. I would say it's definitely one of the worst chapters in the game, and I can definitely understand why I gave up on Chapter 2, because it is not good at all. There's like that one area where you have to like jump between like these two little sections, and kind of this sand, like this quicksand kind of area, and usually quicksand would outright kill you, but you have to jump into it to access an area and actually progress through the game. There is a sign in an area that's telling you to do it, but for a new player, that is just like something that would be easily missed. And it is just really annoying overall. I don't like the puzzles here, and like I would say also getting the tablets to get the dungeon is also pretty annoying as well. One singular positive element, I do think it's charming how the dungeon is kind of like a baseball stadium. I think that is pretty cool. But the boss is like extremely generic. But I also do like the mural Koopas and Goombas. That's cute. But it's still a very, very bad chapter. And what's even worse is Chapter 3. Oh my gosh, I hate this chapter so much when I played it recently. It is so long, and it's basically like you take a little bit of like Thousand Year Doors Chapter 2 and some of like Super Paper Mario's worst moments and amplify it by like 10, maybe 100. And it is just terrible. Like, I hate trying to find like the Wiggler segments here. I mean, I know there's someone out there who might find enjoyment in it, like who might enjoy like the suffering and everything, enjoy the torture, but I do not enjoy it. Like, you have like the Baffle Woods area, which I think is a poorly handled version of Forever Forest. It's not bad, it's like not hard, but it's still annoying, like especially for like a first-time player. And like there are so many levels that you have to like go back to it to get something, or like backtrack to it, use a secret door, go back at the Wiggler segment, go back to it again. It is just awful. I did like Sniff It or Whiff It. That's like the only good part of this. And I guess the boss has like really good music, but it's still not a good boss. It's still not a good boss because like the bosses in this game are designed pretty terribly. Since like they're just wiped out extremely easily with like a thing, or it's also like really hard. But But yeah, Chapter 3 is pretty terrible. Definitely the worst chapter in the series. But moving on, one that isn't quite as bad is Sticker Star's Chapter 4. You know what? I'll put it in okay. Because it does have some redeeming qualities. The Enigma Mansion is the singular good level in this game. I mean, there are some okay levels in Chapter 4 as well, which is why this is an okay. And there are still some pretty weird sections as well. I actually, you know what? I didn't hate the boss here as well. I thought Mr. Blizzard is like probably one of the most well-designed bosses in the game. Because I feel like it's designed kind of similarly to like 64's weakest bosses. I would say kind of like Lava Piranha. Though I do like Lava Piranha, but the weakness kind of is handled in that way, where it's not like egregiously bad with how it's handled and everything. It's not like super easy, because you can kind of get it from like it's pretty obvious. Like when you go into like Mr. Blizzard, like it's like, oh yeah, it's a giant Bowser statue that's like made out of snow, and there's like a snowman piloting it. Yeah, you should obviously take the fiery things. And the fiery thing stickers, like the ones that are like heating things up, they're pretty obvious as well. Like radiator, different things like that, fire flowers, fire hammers. Those are pretty easy to memorize. And it's not like super brain dead easy as well. It's not a great boss, but like definitely better than the other bosses in Sticker Star, I would say. If all of the bosses in Sticker Star were designed like Mr. Blizzard, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with them, as long as Kirsty didn't do that stupid thing at the end of every boss if you don't use like the required things, where she says, it would have been a little easier if you used some things. Because some of the bosses aren't really too hard to take out if you use like infinite jumps and everything, but Chapter 4, I would say it's okay. It does have some weird moments, like Sticker Star always does, and it's still incredibly generic as well, like my main issue with Sticker Star, but not a bad chapter, I would say. I would say that's the only one in the game where I wouldn't say is outright bad. But Chapter 5, yeah, I would say that's outright bad. Maybe not awful like Chapter 2 or Chapter 3, but it still is pretty boring, I would say, especially the first level. And then, like, one of the levels with the Cheap Chomp, I mean, like, for newer players who don't know what to do, it's, like, pretty hard. But, like, once you learn the trick of kind of, like hugging the side, like, the left side of the stage, it is just very easy. And it's just not fun overall. Like, also, like, the Chain Chomp thing as well, and it's just, like, the Chain Chomp, it's like, you literally cannot defeat it. Like, you literally have to get it to, like, fall asleep and then, like, kind of break through the platforms and everything. It's not good, I would say. It's like, I mean, I guess there's a gimmick there, but it's like, I wish, I want an actual battle, I would say, and, I don't like the PD Piranha boss as well, because it's basically just, like, you know, like the super jump in Super Mario RPG? It's basically that, but it's like a required boss. I know the timing is a bit more lenient for the infinite jump, but it still is pretty annoying. But yeah, I don't like Chapter 5 as well. Chapter 6, I would say, you know what, since the final, I would put, okay, I'll put it a little above Chapter 5, even though the final boss is terrible, and the ending is, like, extremely lackluster. I would say, like, the Bowser Jr. airship is not that bad. Like, it's still not great, but, like, everything else in Chapter 6 does kind of bring it down. So, yeah. The only one in Sticker Star that is remotely okay is Chapter 4. But, like, the rest of them are pretty bad. Like I said before, I am skipping Color Splash because that chapter system doesn't really work like the other Paper Mario games, since you do go around to different areas and it works a lot differently. And I haven't beaten Color Splash yet. I have played a good chunk of it, but I still need to go back and beat it sometime soon. But moving on to Origami King, another Paper Mario game that I actually like. But the prologue, I would say is okay. Maybe a little, okay, maybe, I don't know, there isn't much to it. So I would put it like maybe at the bottom of okay. Like, it's harmless, nothing really wrong with it. Decent tutorial for introducing like things like the hammer and a little bit of the battle. It's just so short as well, but it is a pretty fun introduction as well. But I liked it. It was all right. Chapter 1. This is the only part of the game that has like backtracking a little bit, especially if you don't find like the fast travel pipes. I would say this is it's not bad. I would put it in meh. I don't think there's any like egregiously bad chapters in Origami King. I might have ranked one in bad before, but I think Sticker Star is really the only one that has like bad chapters in my opinion. But I would say it's meh. I would say, you know what, maybe I think it's fine where I put it. Like, it has some good elements. Like, I mean, it is kind of generic though. I mean, I do like the Koopa cult thing. Like where there's like this toad running it. I think that's pretty funny. Like they put up like a fake Earth elemental and they're charging like a lot of money for like these Koopas to like worship it. That's pretty funny. Like but I mean it, like, I guess like the bosses are like not that bad either. And it's not too hard either. But I guess that's the problem. It's a little too easy. But yeah, I would say it's just kind of meh. But yeah, moving on. Chapter 2, I would say this one is actually really good. I'm thinking maybe I should put this in great. I actually thought this was great. Like with Bobby's story and everything. I think that was pretty great overall, like with how they handled Bobby. I know some people say like, oh, he's just a generic Bob-omb, but you know what? I think he was written really well, and the whole point of his character was to be generic. I know there's like a lot of characters that actually suffer from being generic, like the Earth Elemental Curator, DJ Toad, different things like that that actually would have benefited from a unique design, but Bobby actually worked. And then also Shogun Studios was also really fun as well. Okay, I know that was kind of a fetch quest. I know that being a bit hypocritical, saying how like 64's Chapter 6 was also a fetch quest, but I feel like it was actually handled better in Chapter 2 of Origami King, since it's all in one area. It's not like spread out between like all these different like flowers and everything. And I think it was just handled better in Chapter 2. It's more of like, it's more on the fun side of a fetch quest, I would say. And also Autumn Mountain is a beautiful area as well. Definitely one of the best looking areas in the series. I would say it's almost as good as like Thousand Year Doors Chapter 2. It just looks incredible overall. And yeah, I just, also the battle theme and the music is great. Even the bosses are kind of fun as well, even though I do have a problem with like some of Origami King's bosses. But Origami King's Chapter 2, I would say, is great. Chapter 3, I would say, is also pretty good. I would put it maybe... I'm trying to think, because like there is a bit of backtracking here. Because I do feel like the backtracking here, I feel like people go on too much about how Thousand Year Door has backtracking, but honestly, I feel like Origami King has like backtracking in that game feels about the same, honestly, due to how you have like these big wide open areas. I mean, in some ways it does make it better, but sometimes like with Chapter 3, you do have to go around a lot, but the vibes of Chapter 3 are great. Actually, I might put it up a little bit. Not as good as 64's Chapter 2 with the desert and everything, but Still pretty fun regardless. I really think like Sniff City with the Sniffits is pretty cool. Actually better than when the Toads have it. I think the gimmick with the sun being taken out of the sky is something taken straight out of 64. That is definitely a very Paper Mario 64-esque scenario, I would say. That's actually kind of similar to the plot of like Chapter 6, since you have like the clouds covering up like the sun and everything. Well, I guess the sun can't get back up into the sky, but I guess that's actually a very similar scenario to like Origami King's Chapter 3. A very like kind of funny 64-esque scenario there, but I would say like it definitely not like too papery focused, but I also really like the ancient kind of theming here, like the ancient civilization. Like you have Professor Toad just kind of like studying it. Kind of like gives me some vibes a little bit of like Colorado, as well as like Frankly a little. He's like a combination of like Colorado and Frankly, like put together, I would say, like character wise. And he has probably one of the best designs and is probably the best handled out of like the partners in the Origami King. Since he actually does have an overworld ability and is actually like a little useful in battle, and you can actually he's technically permanent, since you can kind of go back to the area and you'll have him whenever you're in the Scorching Sandpaper Desert. So I did kind of like that, though he really should have been permanent throughout the whole game, like any partner in Origami King aside from Bobby. But Chapter 3, I would say it's pretty good. And then moving on to Chapter 4, I would still say this is good as well. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe, let's see, maybe like, I guess you know what, I think I'll put it in okay. Because, like, I think the fact that you go around in, like, the ship and everything is excellent. But I do feel like there is a bit of a lack of things to do, I would say, outside of, like, the area where you go into, like, the Ice Elemental dungeon and everything. It does have my favorite character. It does have my favorite character and everything with Captain Teode. But I do feel like it could have been a little better, I would say. So yeah, I would say definitely like towards being good, but I definitely feel like it could have been a little better. So moving on to Chapter 5, this is definitely my favorite chapter in the game. I wouldn't put it quite in peak, because I feel like Origami King, I like Origami King, but I feel like it doesn't reach the peaks of the first 3 games, in my opinion. So I would say, I'm thinking, yeah, this is a pretty good spot. Not quite as good as like 64's. You know what? I'll put it a little above that. I think Chapter 5 is really fun overall. I like the variety it has. Honestly, it has like the level of variety that you would see for like Paper Mario 64, since you have like some jungles, you have like the more sky-based areas, and then you have Bowser's Castle. The whole Bowser's Castle segment is really cool, since you actually have some unique enemies there. Like with the cutout soldiers, since those are really cool overall. And like, and also the Scissors boss fight, I would say, is probably the best out of the Legion of Stationery, even though I don't really like how the Legion of Stationery was handled, like, thematically. It would have been cool if they were, like, actual, like, origami characters, or, like, something kind of like the Smithy Gang, where there were, like, characters, like, modeled after the office supplies that they were. But I think the Scissors boss fight is still, like, pretty fun regardless. But yeah, I think and then you also have Kamek and Bowser Jr., which are pretty fun. And I think it's pretty funny how like how Bowser's minions are like cleaning up Shangri Spa. Shangri Spa is really cool. Definitely gives me like a lot of classic Paper Mario vibes, especially since the Toads are actually fairly unique. I mean, I know they're like copied and pasted like, but they still do have a cool design. And it's pretty cool overall, I would say. But yeah, moving on to Chapter 6, I would also say this is pretty good. Probably one of the best dungeons. Like, one of the best final dungeon. Well, probably the only good final dungeon in modern Paper Mario, I would say. And I would put this in great as well, because it's also pretty fun. And the King Ollie boss is also pretty fun as well. Even though King Ollie is kind of lackluster of a character, I still do enjoy him, and I do think, like, he's a pretty good character overall, despite his flaws. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good finale to a pretty good game. But yeah, even though I didn't rank the Color Splash ones, because I feel like Color Splash, it's really hard to rank, because there are, like, vastly different, like, areas between them. I feel like this is kind of my solid Paper Mario ranking here. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised by, like, how good a lot of the Origami King ones were. Origami King actually has some very solid chapters, I would say. Like, despite the fact that it does have some problems with its, like, battle system and everything, and also being, like, kind of generic. But yeah, a few controversial ones here and there, like Thousand Year Doors Chapter 4 being my favorite, but to be completely honest, it's kind of tied with Chapter 7, I would say. But yeah, I, like, really the only Paper Mario game that has, like, outright bad chapters, I would say, is Sticker Star. Maybe Color Splash when I get to that. And, there probably are going to be some moments that I won't like out of Color Splash, because so far I do not like the battle system. So if I could rank, like, Color Splash as chapters, if there were, like, actual chapters in the game, there might be some that are kind of as bad as Sticker Star, but, Origami King really doesn't really have any outright bad chapters, I would say. Like, most of them are pretty good, if not great. Then some of them are kind of okay and meh, but yeah. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Twitter if you want to. Goodbye.